If you're a rec player struggling to hit a consistent drop shot, this video is for you. I want to share the number one mistake that I see maybe 85, 90% of players that come to me that are struggling with their drop shot, what they do wrong and what we fix. And that is the trajectory of the ball. Almost always it's way too flat. We have this whole setup where you and your partner are back and your opponents are both at the kitchen. So that's when you would try to hit a drop shot. And you want that ball to come up and then literally drop into the kitchen here. What a lot of people do that struggle hitting a consistent drop shot is they hit way too flat and that ball is still rising. Now it might go right over the net, but if it's rising as it's coming over the net, guess where it's coming right back to your feet? Not good. What we want instead is to have that arc on the ball. Now this arc, the height of the ball, could be, as you notice, maybe shoulder to head height, maybe even a little higher. This ball coming up and then coming down, literally dropping as it goes into the kitchen. So again, number one mistake I see is balls coming way too flat. People think they need to hit it right over the kitchen. And what happens? Well, it just comes right back down at your feet. So once I tell people you need more arc, what do they usually do next? Well, they get more arc, but the arc is like here. They hit it way too hard, basically. So they have arc, but they're still hitting it too hard. And what happens? Well, it keeps getting slammed. You need that arc to peak more on your side of the net so that, again, it's literally dropping as it's going past the net. Now, some people think when I start telling them you need more arc that it needs to land like right past the kitchen like this. This can be a problem though, and I want you to just watch. This can be a problem because the ball will sometimes bounce so high that it then gets slammed. So when you're getting this extra arc, just make sure the ball is not bouncing too high as well, because that will also get slammed. So a good trajectory is something like maybe like this, maybe like this. But again, you want it falling as it's going to your opponents. A ball rising up to your opponents is a much easier ball for your opponents to slam than a ball falling. Even if the opponent's contacting it about the same height, a ball falling is a lot harder, and they'll make more mistakes by hitting it in the net or floating it out of bounds when they slam it. So that arc is good for a lot of reasons. One, it gives you more room for error once you learn how to hit it. Two, most of your shots will then be lower for your opponents. And three, even when it is higher, if it's falling, again, your opponents make some silly mistakes that they wouldn't make as much when the ball is floating right up here. So people, again, particularly when the ball is low, really try to avoid this straight path up. That is not a drop shot. There's no chance that this ball ever gets into the kitchen. Even if your opponents weren't here, it would float and come right back here. And that's what I see a lot of people do when they're struggling with the drop shot. Some extra tips on this: you're probably hitting the ball too hard. A lot of people, when they're hitting the drop shot, are hitting too hard. And again, if you were to let the ball bounce, if your opponents weren't there to slam it back at you, the ball would be oftentimes landing somewhere in here, maybe even out of bounds if they let it on a really bad one. And again, a lot of that's caused from people thinking that they need to just clear the net. But when they're doing that, they often will hit it way too flat. And again, if it was to bounce, it bounce back here. What we want instead is the ball literally dropping and then landing somewhere probably around in here. It doesn't have to be right in the kitchen, but it could be like maybe the back half of the kitchen, somewhere in here, somewhere where the ball is going to be either falling. This gives you a lot of room for error. That will get slammed sometimes, but again, the ball falling is a lot likely for your opponents to mess up hitting the ball in the net or out of bounds. So find that arc, find the right amount of pace that you need. Another thing people do is they swing really too hard and then they try to stop their swing right before they hit the ball. This is a problem, again, because the ball will either trampoline off of their paddle and go way too far, or the ball will just kind of die and go into the net or not close enough. What you want, a good drop shot, if you're hitting it with a good pace, you want to go through the ball, and this will make it so that your drop shots are all landing somewhat close together, versus if you try to stop right before you hit it, it's going to trampoline and go really far or go nowhere, and then you have a lot of variance in the depth of where your balls are landing. That's not good when you're hitting a drop shot. You want your balls to be landing somewhere close together, like right in here. Now I want to see what this looks like in a real game. So here we have a senior mixed doubles 3.5 game going on, and here's what a good drop shot looks like. Watch the serving team. She's about to hit the third shot drop. Now let's watch the trajectory of this ball. Great. It's coming up and then literally dropping as it goes over the net. Now the height on the ball was maybe, if someone was standing here, maybe shoulder to head height. It wasn't super high, but it wasn't super flat either. And the important part again is that the peak was more on her side and dropping versus the peak rising and being on their side before it dropped past them. So the ball's dropping well before the opponents, and look, her opponent's having to volley the ball well below the net. Let's see what happens because of this. Pops it up. She does a great drop shot again, and then she finally gets to make a good attack. And that's why we hit these drop shots, because it makes our opponents hit up on the ball, instead of back down at our feet. So great examples of two awesome drop shots, which set up a pop-up for us to slam. Now let's look at one that isn't quite perfect, but is still a decent drop shot. Same player. Let's watch the trajectory on this one. So this one, I would say, has pretty good height, but the depth, like, it's a little too deep. It's not like if this would have peaked here and dropped, that would have been great, but it peaked a little too close to her opponents, so they were able to hit a kind of a high ball. This wasn't a bad drop shot. It was just not a great one. But she's doing a good job of getting the right arc on the ball. Again, if she was doing this poorly, and again, the number one mistake I see, she would be hitting way too flat. And this ball would be very close. It would be catching the net or going just over the net when she did it well. But she's giving herself a lot of room for error. She's clearing the net by a lot. And again, this trajectory is what we want. Even though this particular drop shot wasn't as good as a lot of the ones she hit before, I wanted to show you one that's not as good, but still fine. So there you have it. Number one mistake, again, when I see people hitting a drop shot that are struggling with it, is way too flat of a trajectory. Try to get that arc. Try to have that ball literally dropping as it goes past the net, hence the word drop shot, and trying to land it in here. Try to go through the ball. Try not to make sure you're not swinging too hard and stopping at the ball, causing it to trampoline off of your ball and either go nowhere or go flying. Just see if you can find that arc. Try to land it somewhere in here, and let me know how it goes in your games. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.